first panel discussion of the day, that is diagnosis of early lung cancer patient. And the moderator for this session is Dr. Shyam Agarwal. Dr. Shyam Agarwal is a senior consultant at Sir Gangaram Hospital, New Delhi. Dr. Agarwal is a very renowned oncologist in Delhi. Being a noted oncologist, he has been awarded and facilitated with many awarded and recognition. The panelist for the session is from surgical oncology, Dr. Sanjay Sharma. Dr. Sanjay Sharma is a surgical oncologist and director at Asian Cancer Institute, Mumbai. Dr. Vikas Mahajan. Dr. Vikas Mahajan is practicing surgical oncologist at Apollo Hospital, Chennai. Dr. C. Ramachandran. Dr. C. Ramachandran is currently functioning and director of Kidway Memorial Institute, Oncology, Bangalore. Dr. George K. is a renowned oncologist and from Parel, Mumbai, and he is currently associated with Tata Memorial Hospital in Parel, Mumbai. From medical oncologist, Dr. Prashad Narayanan is a senior consultant at Cyticare Cancer Hospital, Bangalore. From pathology, Dr. Deepak Kumar Mishra is currently working as a senior consultant at Tata Medical Center. From pulmonologist, Dr. Avinav Buliani is a consultant pulmonologist and practice at Sir Gangaram Hospital in Rajendra Nagar, Central Delhi. And from pathology, Dr. Deepak Kumar Mishra is currently working as a senior consultant at Tata Medical Center, India. And Dr. Vikas Marwa is a senior advisor and consultant pulmonologist at Army Institute of Cardiothoracic Science, Pune. So I would like to ask Dr. Shyam Agarwal to continue with the session.
So thank you, madam, and good afternoon, everybody. I wish to thank Professor Advani and Dr. Gopinath for this opportunity and apologize to Dr. Chandrakant and Dr. Sajna Dutt for, taking over this session because there's an engagement subsequently. So I think in the opening remarks, Professor Advani made this comment that we've come a long day in our ability to perhaps, change the course of this illness over the years, especially the last 20, 30 years. And that has possibly happened because of the changes in our ability to diagnose them early to some extent. And then, of course, the newer agents which are available through biological markers. So I think in the next half an hour or so, we will, through our panelists, get home some points and discuss this issue. So can I have the next slide? So we have a panel of senior stalwarts and a galaxy of panelists with us. So I'm honored to have them with me. Can I have the next slide? We begin the questions. So they've already been introduced. Next, please. Right. So, this is a 2020 NEJM paper.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, just a minute. Sir, Deepak K. Mishra is not available. So we would like to ask Dr. Sarjana Dutt for in place of him.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So I think you've seen these two papers which are quoted here. One is from NEJM and the other is the incidence and mortality with the extended follow-up in the National Lung Screening Trial. So I like to request Dr. Sanjay Sharma. So, your thoughts on, screening and, the impact of screening in our country vis-a-vis as compared to the data published from abroad. Dr. Sanjay. Can you unmute yourself, sir? You are muted. Dr. Sanjay, you are muted.
Okay, I got it. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Shyam, for such a lucid presentation. I'm waiting for that to have today. And thank Dr. Advani and Gopinath for giving us the opportunity to be on this platform. Now, come to the point. See, anyway, any country which is in a developing stage, really not the right place to a large scale, population of patients when you can do screening. For example, Bengal or for example, Northeast, very high incidence of smoking. Even in these crop of patients, chronic patients, if you do all these kinds of screening trials, like low CT scans and these things are really going to be helpful, because now even the second trial for screening abroad in a smaller group also has shown evidence. So I think here we are unfortunately getting very advanced cases. By doing this, I think we will alert the patient. It is not going to be very costly. So mass screening certainly is not no, but selective group of smokers in a very high incidence area is welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Vikas Marwa. So, do you echo these, points, or you think there could be some kind of a trial which can be run in our country on high-risk individuals? And can you define those high-risk individuals?
Yes, sir. I partly agree with sir that in a developing country like ours, we cannot do and imitate what the West has been doing, because there are walk-in CTs. Like if you go to a filling station and if you're a smoker, age more than 50, you just walk in, get a CT scan done. So it is just not the nodule screening. You also have to have capacity for treatment of what other collateral things you diagnose. In a large cell CT scanning, programs, they found a lot of scars, lot of nodules, lot of tuberculosis, lot of ILD. So all that would also need to be addressed. So we have to have a focused kind of a strategy where we do a high risk screening rather than doing a mass screening. So smokers beyond a particular age. So most of the trials have used either 50 or 55 years of age. So smokers who are at high risk, who've got a family history, who are more than 50 years of age. So as a pulmonologist, we normally do that. We have a COPD patients coming to us. So if there is a family history, if they're more than 50, so the index of suspicion should be high. So I feel it should be a selective high risk early detection rather than a mass screening at present in a country.
Okay, so can we move on to the next slide, please? So I think everybody seems to say that we should be doing the screening for high risk individuals where the smoking index is perhaps more than 200 and the age is maybe more than 50. So I think that is what came out of this consensus, which was recently published. I think Dr. Abhinav Guliani is there, because he's a
yes, sir, I'm there. Sir.
Yeah, Abhinav, I mean, this is a rampant problem of misdiagnosing patients for tuberculosis, delaying the diagnosis. I mean, what is your experience? What are your thoughts in that direction? Because you do so much of bronchoscopy and all these patient evaluation.
Certainly, sir. There is a lot of overlap as well. There are some patients who have both the diseases and they are being treated for one. And since the incidence of tuberculosis in our country is really high, we tend to see and tend to
We are not able to hear you.
We can't hear you.
Population. Can you hear me now, sir?
Yeah.
So as I was saying, that since the incidence of tuberculosis is very high in our country, we tend to miss out patients with coexisting diseases, coexisting lung cancers, maybe an early finding, and tend not to investigate much, given the cost constraints and everything. But I think now we should definitely move on to proving tuberculosis before starting the treatment. That should be the agenda for everybody. And with that, the missing out of lung cancer diagnosis would certainly decrease. Also, there are many patients who have coexisting diseases. And this is the subset which would be picked up easily. Plus, there is also a subset which has scar carcinoma, wherein the patient had tuberculosis and the healed scar that develops cancer later on. Those are the patients whom you should be screening as well. So I would like to add on to the high-risk population amongst those who are smoking and elderly. Also, elderly who have had tuberculosis, they should also be screened to a certain extent, not that frequently, but yes, they should also undergo the screening.
Yeah.
And
Dr. Mahajan, your thoughts on
our
this?
main aim should be to confirm the diagnosis of tuberculosis.
Yeah, sure, Abhinav. Dr. Mahajan, please.
Yeah, so I wanted to add one more point here, is that we have to find out what is the incidence of non-smokers with lung cancer versus patients who have been smokers and they have developed lung cancer, or who have tuberculosis and lung cancer. If we get this particular this thing in our population, with the recent trial which has come from Taiwan, in which they have found out that the incidence of cancer in non-smokers is almost equivalent to patients who have been smokers. We have to then only strategize that what is the group of patients which should be screened. Of course, in that particular trial, the people who have some family history of lung cancer, somebody in the family had a lung cancer, the chances of having a non-smoking patient with lung cancer becomes increased. So all these factors need to be taken into consideration also.
Okay, Dr. Sanjay, you want to make any comments?
Yeah, I partly agree with Vikas, but you must understand that India is not an Asian country. We are still Caucasian. So Asian incidence of all these kinds of non-smokers are very, very high, to 60 to 70%, as you mentioned, especially in India. Now there are a lot of work by Tata Memorial, in All India Institute and other places, and in our centers also, for all comers with some kind of pulmonary problems. The overall incidence, even in cancer patients of so-called non-smoker, is just about 25% or less, not more than that. So we have to consider that we are not in par with high incidence of so-called non-smokers in India.
Right. So I think overall, the world over, our ability to detect lung cancer early is not good at all. You know, hardly you get 5% or at the most 10% patients in stage 1 or stage 2. Most of these patients are in stage 3, 4. And you need to really, think about this as to how can we improve the early diagnosis. So can we go to the next slide? Okay, so I think we've covered the low dose CT, which should be done in high risk individuals, and scanning, and the question is, once you have a patient who has got lung cancer, so Dr. Prasad Narayan, so who is a senior medical oncologist, so what do you think we should be doing with these tumors which we are getting now on a tissue? And do you do brain scanning at baseline for all these patients?
So brain scanning at baseline, if the patient is going to undergo surgery, sir, mostly all centers are doing. And the tissue biopsy, initially we're not doing the mutation testing and all for all lung cancer patients. But now with the data on adjuvant TKIs, most of the patients are getting most of us are doing the tissue for EGFR mutation analysis.
So are you sticking only to EGFR or doing?
No, sir. We do the full panel when we are doing, actually, because regardless of what is the stage of the lung cancer, first of all, early lung cancer is something which we look forward to see. Very hardly we see these patients who undergo surgery and come to us. But if at all they come, most of the time we do the full panel and keep, because when there is a recurrence, we know what was the biology in the beginning.
So Dr. Sarjana, so you are doing at the lab. So are you doing all IHC markers, and what IHC markers are you doing to differentiate between various types of lung cancer?
Right. So Dr. Shyam, as is very, very clearly mentioned in NCCN, so far as a histopathological tissue diagnosis can be made even just on an H&E, there is as such no requirement for doing an IHC. IHC becomes a requirement only if there is a confusion and a need to further stratify and know whether there is at least any sort of an adenocarcinoma component in the tumor tissue that we are dealing with. And one doesn't require more than 2 or 3 antibodies. So one which rules in favor of adenocarcinoma such as TTF1 or napsin, and the other such as P40 or P63, one can just use 2 antibodies to clarify whether there is at least any adenocarcinoma component. And if there is, then one goes further with the biomarker testing, which we now know that even in early stage lung cancer, it is important and mandatory to do at least an EGFR mutation analysis testing. Of course, if we are dealing with an advanced stage lung cancer, then it becomes mandated to add on ALK, ROS, and PD-L1 testing as well. but at least an EGFR mutation analysis testing must be done even in early stage lung cancer.
Right. So I think you've covered it very nicely. That I think 2 IHC markers are by and large sufficient to differentiate between squamous versus adeno, which is T40 and TTF1. And of course, if you are looking at an advanced stage, well, then you need to do the whole panel, which includes, I think, at least 10 genes or so. Even 5 genes are, becoming short these because we have much more, drugs available today to target. I think Prasad will agree with me on this. Dr. Prasad?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay, can we go to the
However, I would say, sir, that by and large, the bulk of testing that comes to the lab still focuses around EGFR, ALK, ROS, PDL1, BRAF in certain cases, and really not much beyond that. Of course, there are certain centers from which we get the full-on NGS panel as well, but primarily these 5 or 6 markers is where the main focus is.
Yeah, in the meetings with the medical oncologists, this is becoming more and more competitive, and people want even 1% or less than 1% to be diagnosed, because you don't want to miss anything and then land yourself in trouble subsequently. But maybe that we can debate some other day. Let's move on to the next slide.
Comment on the tissue material.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very important. Very important. Please.
So tissue material, if it is beyond 2 years, then it is not good for genetic studies. So even in early cancers, it is better to do some of the genetic studies early. So molecular studies especially, so that because the DNA extraction, the DNA gets fragmented and some problem occurs. So after 2 years, if the patient develops metastasis, it becomes a very big problem. So tissue sample from that paraffin block is very important. That needs to be remembered.
Sir, I would just want to stress here that there are very, very clear guidelines as to how exactly the tissue must be fixed and preserved. And so long as one is actually following those guidelines of using 10% neutral buffered formalin, those samples, those paraffin blocks can actually yield decent quality DNA material for testing even years down the line.
Absolutely. So I think most of the labs are now have learned all this, because they're all asking for those kind of tests. And if repeatedly the tests are not coming positive, well, then obviously there is some problem in the fixing of the sample. And I think a lot of good labs have evolved into preserving the tissue in a proper way, so that the DNA can be suitably extracted and then tested. So I think we go on to the next slide. So now, we basically let us see stage 3. And Abhinav is there. Before I go to the surgeons, Dr. Abhinav?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, if you have a patient where you're suspecting mediastinal or hilar nodes, so are you doing EBUS routinely in your patients? Or what is the role of mediastinoscopy, which will come to maybe Dr. Sanjay and the other thoracic surgeons? So what is the scope of EBUS, in the diagnosis of stage 3?
So basically, so we are sampling all possible nodes and doing lymph node sampling before surgeries and any patient who presents for staging purposes. And we generally do not go in for mediastinoscopy, because we can do a combined procedure of endobronchial ultrasound and EUSB, which is the EUS done through the bronchoscope, the endobronchial ultrasound itself, by putting it into the esophagus. And with that, we tend to sample all possible nodes, except for leaving out station 5, station 6. And that sort of covers it. And that obviates the need for mediastinoscopy. And this is now the new gold standard for lung cancer staging.
So in a patient, who has a PET CT scan showing nodes in the hilar or in the mediastinal region, so I think we need to refer these patients for EBUS.
Certainly, sir. Certainly, sir. Certainly, sir. And this, I think, as the previous talk by Dr. Bal was also there.
Yes.
And routinely, they send their patients to us for staging before they go in for the surgery, because we can sample nodes as small as almost 5 millimeters. And during EBUS, we can prepare a cell block as well, which is sufficient for tissue sampling, sufficient for genetic testing. And the newer thing which is coming in is intranodal forceps biopsy. So we can even take a bigger tissue just in case the tissue is insufficient through the EBUS itself by putting in a smaller biopsy forceps
Right.
into the node and taking the sample.
Yeah. Right. Abhinav, I think that's a very important message, and that's what you heard from the surgeons and we all medical oncologists and the lab people, that tissue is the issue. And unless
Absolutely.
you have good tissue available in form of cell blocks or as you said for a forceps biopsy, we will not be able to do the IHC and these DNA studies. So let's go on to stage 3. Dr. Vikas Mahajan, sir, hilar nodes, mediastinal nodes, scalene nodes. Well, now you have N1, N2, N3. Can we kind of have a little discussion, because that formulates the early lung cancer, please, and the operability.
So in stage 3, if there is a node positive disease, if we see on the PET scan especially, we normally go ahead and get a EBUS to confirm it. And if there is N2 nodes, we normally go for chemotherapy first. This is the normal practice for our group. Subsequently, we discuss with the patient about the treatment modality, whether to go ahead with surgery or with radiation therapy. So this is discussed in our multidisciplinary meeting and also discussed individually with the patient, and then a decision is taken. So there are a number of situations we do surgery for these patients. In a number of situations, we don't do surgery. We go ahead with radiation therapy.
So Dr. Vikas Marwa, so if you have, bulky N2 or you have multi-station N2, so, how do you handle in the multidisciplinary approach, whether you would like to go in for neoadjuvant or CTRT or surgical approach? So what are the thought process there?
If the multi-station N2, upfront surgery does not improve survival. So in these patients, you have to give a neoadjuvant therapy. So even if you do a very good job surgically, the mortality benefit is not there if a neoadjuvant approach is not there. So there should be chemotherapy, and thereafter there should be an attempt at surgery, because its disease is already systemic in a multi-station N2 disease.
Yes. So I think Dr. Sanjay Sharma, who is a veteran, would like to say words on mediastinoscopy as well. And you really need to sum it up as to who are the candidates for surgery and who should not be going in for surgery.
Now, thanks, Shyam, for this. First of all, regarding diagnostic mediastinoscopy, more and more people like Dr. Giuliani and all these people who are doing EBUS. As a surgeon, my role has now reduced to sending the patient to them and getting a diagnosis. The EBUS is the standard of care. Hardly any case in which we do mediastinoscopy, which is obviously is a very invasive procedure, and it is an admission procedure, while the other things are staged before the patient comes to you. Regarding stage 1, no question, anything lesion up to 3 centimeter, straight surgery. And if the PET is totally mediastin negative, I go ahead and operate. I don't do routine EBUS or this thing. Any shadow which is high SU value in a node, if it's in clinically stage 1, I would do an EBUS to rule out that it is stage 1 or 2. Secondly, all stage 2 up to 2B is not a major issue unless and until you have certain pulmonological problems, whether the patient needs surgery or a sleeve or whatever. Regarding 3, where the problem arises, and in up to 3A, there are not too many of them. They usually fall back into N2. So N1 is fine up to 3A. We can consider that we can operate. But in such cases, usually what I have seen in our practice, the lesion primary also is quite big. So now we have enough data to suggest that do you downstage them and by chemotherapy and then operate. That's better in 3-1A. I'm not talking about overall survival rate yet, but there is a data available for DFS in this group of patients if you do surgery. Regarding N2, I agree with Vikas totally. That either it depends on the institutional policy. You do a concurrent CTRD before and then assess, or you can do upfront chemotherapy. And we do the same thing as in our institution. We do not normally radiate because it technically becomes very difficult to operate if they respond, and if dissection is difficult. Since our teaching institution, we give chemotherapy easier to operate afterwards in an N2 disease where it dissolves. But N3, as Dr. Vikas Marva said, absolutely no for surgery, and this is a pure, simple case of concurrent CTRT, which now world over we have enough literatures available. So yes, but as Dr. Sabit Bal mentioned that there are occasional cases when you need to do the salvage scenario. This has reduced absolutely to nothing. Maybe we can do 1 or 2 cases a year, which is with high mortality, it is nearly not advisable. So we have enough avenues available in medical and other spheres that vis-a-vis in terms of immunotherapy, and depending on the biological markers, I think the surgeon's role is receding.
Right, great, Dr. Sanjay. So thanks for your wonderful comments. Since you raised immunotherapy, Dr. Prasad is there. So in stage 3, concurrent chemoradiation, would you make a comment on the role of, immunotherapy or immune checkpoint inhibitors? So what is your take?
So I think we were waiting for something to happen in stage 3 patients who get concurrent chemoradiation, because regardless, even though we consider that as a curative aided treatment, majority of the patients relapse. But with the data of adjuvant immunotherapy with durvalumab, I think all the patients who undergo definitive therapy with concurrent chemoradiation should be discussed about this important advance which has happened, and which can actually improve the survival in big time in many of these patients.
Perfect. So would you like to comment in EGFR positive? What is your take for patients who have been operated regarding the role of TKI?
Adjuvant chemotherapy has been established. Adjuvant role of TKI was not established for a long time, and chemotherapy was established. But now we have the trial on osimertinib in adjuvant setting with a definite improvement DFS, and it's a drug which is very well tolerated. We can discuss the cost in another session, but definitely for a patient who can take this medicine, we should recommend giving adjuvant osimertinib in post-operative EGFR positive patients.
Right. So I think we are short of time, Dr. Sarjana. So there was a question in the slide deck which will come in the end, I guess. So what do you recommend, RT-PCR, NGS, or Sanger sequencing today for molecular testing on these lung cancer cases?
Cycle sequences, of course, completely ruled out, because the analytical sensitivity of that method is such that until and unless some 18 to 20% cells carry the mutation, you would not return a positive result. So definitely Sanger sequencing, pyrosequencing as well is out. Clearly, the method of choice are either ARMS PCR or NGS. And herein, of course, the question of affordability comes in. If the patient is affording, I would really stress upon it that have a very, very clear, complete, concise, comprehensive genotyping of the tumor tissue. Go ahead with NGS. However, if the patient cannot afford the cost, although the costing of the NGS also is consistently falling down, however, at least the markers of EGFR using ARMS PCR, ALK, ROS, PDL1 are the bare minimum that should be considered.
Perfect. So I think you just summed it up very nicely, that NGS is the way to go. But if somebody can't afford, well, then maybe RT-PCR and IHCs can be done. So I think I can just maybe finish it here because we are running short of time. So I think a lot needs to be done to detect lung cancer early, because early detection is really going to change the outcome. We don't have any programs in our country to do low dose CT scan for high risk people. It's only done on an individual basis. But maybe I think Dr. Arvind Kumar is coming next to do the session. So he is really pioneering for low dose CT scans in high risk individuals. So we really need to make some more teams to that effect to really pick these cancers early. We need to do the bronchoscopy in suspected patients early, and we should actually educate the physicians, the general physicians, to send patients early and have a high index of suspicion for early detection of lung cancer. And then, of course, in suitable patients, EBUS is the way to go to look at the nodes. Mediastinoscopy is out. I think enough centers are there to perform adequate surgery. But then, of course, CT-RT, immune checkpoint inhibitors are there to prolong or to take care of these patients. So I think with these comments,
Shyam, I'm going to intervene 1 minute.
yes,
Just to inform that we at Asian Cancer Institute are just about ready to start a high-risk screening group, screening for all smokers and all. We're
excellent.
including practically all the pulmonologists and surgeons from Mumbai. Maybe other centers can join. And I think if you collate the data, maybe I'll send you the details what we are planning. So if we get a large number of patients and different for folks of time and together, I think it's high time India produce this data and show to the world that yes, we are not lagging behind. So I think, and pretty soon
Absolutely.
I'll inform Arvind as well and all of you that we are going to start right away. So
So,
maybe another 1 month will start.
so early detection, chemotherapy, radiation, choice of patients, selection of patients, immunotherapy, TKIs. So all this has really contributed in a big way to really bring down the mortality of lung cancer, but still a long way to go to really, improve the survival in a big way. So I think with this, I close here and hand it over to the organizers. Thank you very much to the esteemed panel for this interactive discussion. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, co-panelists.
Thank you all the panel members and the moderator for your viewpoint. It was a nice discussion covering all the major points of lung cancer diagnosis.